Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the closing roundtable of our series One Word's Transcultural Echoes on Reproductive Justice. First, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the Center for the Study of Contemporary Women's Writing, which is hosted at ILCN, for their support in bringing this series to life. And again, a special thank you goes to Katie Collins for a seamless handling of all the technological aspects. Your work has been essential to this journey. So, as I explained in the first seminar, One Word was born out of a pressing need to confront the enduring realities of reproductive injustice. And my own personal experiences navigating these challenges opened my eyes to the broader systems that perpetuate inequity and exclusion. Yet, in those moments of hardship, I found a profound source of connection and empowerment through women's writing. And this literature became a mirror to my struggles, but also a call to action, showing how storytelling can both expose injustices but also inspire change. So this series brought together voices that explore the intersections of reproductive justice across cultures, histories, and geographies. By centering literature and storytelling, WombWor invited us to reflect on the shared and divergent experiences of those impacted by reproductive inequalities. It has become a space for critical engagement and collective imagining, aiming to spark solidarity and action in the face of systemic barriers. Today, we are very, very fortunate to have three incredible speakers joining us: Andrea O'Reilly, Lorinda Peterson, and Orsola Severini. Our session today will begin with a guided discussion divided into 5 parts, followed by an open question and answer. Feel free to type your questions in the chat, raise your virtual hand, and a quick note: while the guided discussion is being recorded, the Q&A session will not be, to ensure a more open and free-flowing conversation. Before we start, I will briefly introduce each of our speakers with a very short bio note, and then we'll dive into the discussion. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and let's get started. So our first speaker is Dr. Andrea O'Reilly, who is internationally recognized as the founder of motherhood studies and its subfield maternal theory. She's the creator of matricentric feminism, a feminism for and about mothers, and matricentric, a literary theory and practice for a reading of mother-focused text. She is full professor in the School of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at York University, founder and editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Motherhood Initiative, and publisher of Demeter Press. She is co-editor and editor of 30+ books on many motherhood topics. Her 2024 titles include Careful Relationship Between Mothers and the Caregivers They Hire, The Mother Wave, Theorizing, Enacting, and Representing Matricentric Feminism, and The Missing Mother. She is the author of 4 monographs, including Matricentric Feminism, Theory, Activism, and Practice. The second edition came out in 2021. And In Motherhood, Writings on Mothering and Motherhood, 2009-2024, which came out this year. She has published 15 chapters on 30 post-2010 novels, memoirs, that will soon be published in the monograph Matricentric as Literary Theory and Criticism, Reading the Maternal in Post-2010 Women's Narrative. She has received more than $1.5 million in funding for her research projects, including her current one on millennial mothers. So thank you, Andrea, for being here. Our second speaker is Lorinda Peterson, who holds a PhD and an MA in Cultural Studies and a BA with honors in English from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. She's a queer mother, academic, writer, poet, and visual artist. Her beautiful graphic memoir, My Kind of Crazy, was published in summer 2023 by Demeter Press. Her poetry collection, Catastrophic Imaginaries, is under consideration by a Canadian press. She previously co-edited a collection for Demeter on middle-aged mothering and is currently co-editing two collections for Demeter, one on mothering and life writing, and she's the best co-editor, and one on queer motherhood. She has published articles on mothering, trauma, memory, writing, art, and body, and published poetry in Canadian literary journals. In a past life, she worked for 15 years in marketing and communications at Queen's. So thank you, Lorinda, for being here. And our last speaker, Orsola Severini, born in Rome in 1981 to a French mother and an Italian father. She is a brilliant writer and French teacher. She holds a degree in contemporary history and a master in linguistics from the Sorbonne in Paris. Her first novel, Il Consolo, published by Fandango Libri in 2021, tackles the sensitive topic of therapeutic abortion in Italy. Based on her personal experience, her book highlights the challenges faced by women, including inadequate medical facilities, insensitive doctors, and societal stigma. Il Consolo is deeply a powerful denunciation of the Italian healthcare system and a poignant narrative of personal loss and resilience. Her second novel, La Quarta Compagna, published this year by Fandango Libri, pays tribute to the Italian women who fought during the resistance against the fascist regime. Inspired by the true story of Isolina Lina Morandotti, the book vividly brings to life the emotions and experiences of the protagonist. So thank you, Orsola, for being here. So as I said, the first part of this roundtable will be guided by some questions that I've prepared for the three speakers, based, of course, on your expertise, on your own works, on your background, but also picking up some of the keywords, some of the reflections, some of the concerns and questions which have emerged during our previous pre-seminars. The first point, which I title Reproductive Justice as Personal and Political, actually refers to the fact that in many contribution of our previous seminars, we talk a lot about life narratives, biographical and autobiographical text. And also, all of you have written extensively about your personal experiences with mothering, non-mothering, and related topics. Of course, through different formats like graphic memoirs, novels, autoethnographic vignettes, and theoretical texts. So my first two questions are for all of you, and about how does the concept of reproductive justice manifest in your work, particularly in terms of the feminist principle that the personal is political? And in what ways do you think personal writings and so life writings, which as I said, we have explored widely throughout this series, contribute to broader political struggles for reproductive justice? That's a huge question. Andrea, do you want to go first?
Oh, I get to go first, do I? Yeah, that's I've been thinking about this question since you sent it to me, I think probably a week plus ago. There's so many ways I could answer it. But I probably will defer more to the writers among us here. Because I am not a writer in that sense, I'm not a creative writer. I'm writing in the genre, if you will, of theory. But my passion and my training is in literature. I hold a PhD in English. And I fundamentally believe, and increasingly so as I age, how much stories are part of what we need, to do this work we're doing. I think in narratives, fiction, memoirs as well, there's more of a permission or possibility to explore, unpack, uncovered often the taboo topics of mothering, the rage, the anger, the ambivalence, the regret, the doubt, the uncertainty. I think in our real lives, we self-censor, right? We are understandably so. For some women to speak the truth around issues of reproductive justice could result in quite literally our children being apprehended from us if you are a marginalized woman. So I think literature, because you can say, oh, it's fiction, gives us that space. That's, I think, a very needed space where we can, confront head on often very difficult, challenging, and often censored taboo topics. So I always say, write. As mothers, tell those stories, because it's in those places, I think, where we can model change, we can do the critiques, and perhaps imagine and create that world we want from others.
Thank you, Andrea. Lorinda?
Okay. Andrea, first I want to say that it was your super theory that encouraged me to proceed with my work, and that it's invaluable in all the work that we do and all the studies. So just wanted to say that. I will approach most of these questions from my position as an activist artist, drawing. Sometimes I will say comics, and sometimes I will say graphic memoir, because the graphic memoir uses comics conventions in creating it. But I think my work provides greater access to stories in a form that's accessible to more people, because it's a comic. It can be seen as, oh, well, kind of light, not that serious, but it provides, through the conventions, huge opportunities to look at these complex issues, and to and to kind of deconstruct them and then reconstruct them because of the time that operates in the comics. But where I come from is, actually, I found some interesting writing on this very thing. So starting with Bell Hooks, of course, who said that, we need to find more accessible ways to provide education about issues that, for her in her time, were not accessible to and we're not providing the truth about the different aspects of her life. And then we have Sarah Ahmed, who said, okay, so Bell was talking about, in the academe, we need to, in the system, in the institution, we need to create more opportunity. Sarah Ahmed said, yeah, no, the system and the institution just aren't working, because they just do not allow us to speak about these kind of personal issues. Okay, we can't make them political. So she, 2016, I believe, decided that she was going to pursue her work outside the academe, in more like social media and other sites that she chose to pursue, because it gave her more voice, it gave her more opportunity. And then we have Jane Gallup, who is a theorist, and she talks about anecdote and how it ties a feminist writer, her everyday life, to space in the academe, because anecdote is also perceived generally as something that's light. It's not, always taken seriously. However, there are opportunities to create it very seriously. And what I do is so this novel, this graphic memoir, was part of my PhD research creation thesis. So I created it for my PhD. So it gave me the opportunity to embed the research into the graphic memoir, but also to create a written thesis around it and several other works of art that I did at the same time. And it makes visible, inclusive the stories, and makes the mothers and the people involved actors in their own lives. And it brings this work into the academy. And my hope, actually, in creating it, was that the art remained within the academy, because it's there, it's published as a thesis, and it would unsettle the comfortable truths that we have around this issue. Like, it's too easy to sweep them under the rug, and too easy to just not look at them. But also to move beyond the academy, also as a reminder of this truth in the larger public. So the untruth truths, the comfortable truth, the one we want to accept. So by deconstructing it and kind of tearing it apart in different ways as I go through, and then reconstructing it again, creative destruction, they call it. I hope to have created that kind of tension and dialogue in that, the political and the personal.
Thank you, Lorinda. Orsola.
Yes. So I'm going to tell you the moment I decided to write my book, which is about a personal story. I was reading maybe the main Italian newspaper, which is Corriere della Sera, and in the second page, maybe, there was an interview to the Pope Francis, which is at the time, he was believed to be quite a progressive pope. And in this interview, he compared women who had therapeutical abortion to the Nazis, who terminated, people that had like genetical diseases. And I felt so anger, I started to run because I couldn't stand still. And I said, maybe if he knew what I've been through, because I had a therapeutical abortion in this country a few years earlier, maybe he would apologize to me because he doesn't know what he's talking about. So it's funny, right? Now when I think about it, it's funny, but it was like a symbol that for me, it was so important to share my story. Because before living that experience, I didn't know what it was to have an abortion in Italy, which is a country where abortion is legal since 1978. But because the same law that enabled abortion allows all kind of health practitioner to be to object their conscience, that means that they have the right not to perform these abortions. So now we're in a situation where 80% of healthcare professionals refuse to have abortion, and many women cannot access that. So yes, it really was really personal to me in that moment. So I first started to write this for me because I needed to tell, even if it was only on my computer, I needed to put it down in words, and then I thought I could turn this personal anger, this personal experience into something bigger. And maybe I said, if it happened to me, it happened to many women here, and why we don't hear about it, right? That's the first, the genesis, let's say.
As someone who's going through something very similar, I found your book so inspiring and so empowering. So thank you, Orsola. So the second point was about the role of the body, because of course, mostly our speakers in talking about the three main rights of reproductive justice, to not to have a child, to raise children in healthy and safe environments, discuss cultural texts and novels who were very much concerned with the body and with representations of the body in these experiences. So my first question is for you, Lorinda, because I really like that in the foreword to your My Kind of Crazy, you write about the body as a site where trauma, memory, and cultural suffering reside, emphasizing that, and I quote from you, bodies carry histories. So trauma and vulnerability have been recurring themes in the seminar series. So how do you see this concept shaping the discourse, your discourse on reproductive justice?
Yes. So I can attest to the fact that bodies carry trauma, and just because all the artwork that I will talk about today and the artwork that I won't talk about is based on trauma, and it's personal. And as a creator creating it, I experienced. We can never re-experience trauma, but I definitely re-experienced the memory in ways that I'll talk about later on my body. I know that experience of how the body becomes involved in recreating these stories. I want to share something. I'm actually going to share a bit here, and I hope this works. It's not the one I want to share, so let's see if we can get. Where's my little arrow? Oh no. All right, there we go. Okay. This is the one I want to share. Okay. So this is from a story in my novel. It's about my grandmother. And I'm just going to read what it says. Ha ha ha. Do you think I could just cut it off? My grandmother was the kind of crazy that wields a serrated knife, threatens to remove the plane under her ribs by carving away fat rolls on her belly, then laughs. Now, the story behind this is that my grandmother's daughter, was killed instantly as a young girl, 7, fell off a snowbank, was hit by a snowplow and killed. And my grandmother mourned in a way that is described, in various pieces of literature that are not feminist as, Freud would call it hysterical. There was no feminist understanding of it. She was called crazy. So she took pills and she, did all kinds of things to try to help herself get through that grief, but it did not work. So in an act, she threatened, and this was real, she threatened this. I remember it when I was a child. But, is it so crazy to think of her in that instant, whether she carries through or not, of wanting to cut away that empty womb, that moment of conception, the moment of birth, and the moment of death. They're going to come together in one instant for her, as she remembers and grieves the passing of her child. And I think that for me, when I'm thinking about how the body records stories, I think this is a really graphic representation. This is my grandmother's story, embodied, and her reaction to it, and what the rest of the chapter would explain, the context around it. But this is how I see, one example of this from a reproductive injustice perspective, because it's misunderstood. Of course, we're talking about 1950s. Earlier, we're talking about 1930s, maybe. So we're going quite a ways back here. But this was how it was understood. And this, I think a reframing, and I've just finished a paper actually that I sent off to Humanities, and I reframed motherhood through a matricentric lens, and understanding it from this perspective puts a very different spin on it, and moves it into, I think, a 21st century context of understanding the maternal and the body, and how women's experiences are not only contained in the body but also expressed through the body. Yeah, I think that's probably all I have to say about that. But that's my way to look at that. We can think of affect, as expressions of memory, and affect are understood as kind of impulse on the body that we experience, and again, that would inform my grandmother's reactions to that. Yeah, that's.
Thank you, Lorinda. And I definitely recommend your graphic novel to everyone. We had in the first seminars 2 papers on graphic novels, and it was so much appreciated to have a discussion also on these. So definitely this is a fantastic field to explore women's writing and reproductive justice. Going to you, Ursula, again, thinking of the role of the body. Of course, in your novel, Il Consolo, the body is a sort of central agent because of the experience you are talking about. And you want to interrupt your sharing, Lorinda?
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it off the screen. Is it gone?
No.
I think you have to.
It's called just a second.
Okay, and then you go back to Zoom. Okay, and you stop sharing. Back to you, Ursula. So I actually wrote a chapter which is forthcoming on your novel, and one of the theoretical references I used is Laura Kahn, who talks about abortion and therapeutic abortion as experiences of visceral sense making, because pregnancy loss and abortion affect women's bodies as entities both connected to and distant from their identity. So my question for you is again, how do you approach writing about the body in relation to your specific experience, but more generally to reproductive justice?
Yes, it's very true. I think I remember when I was experiencing the process of, because I had this diagnosis of, I was 4 months pregnant, and in the ultrasound, it shows that the baby had like heart malformation, so he wasn't able to live. So I had to terminate the pregnancy, or the pregnancy would be terminated alone, but we couldn't know when. So it could be like 8 months, 10 months, or maybe at birth, and then it could be very risky for me too. So I tried to access this procedure, but it was very difficult because I already had two children, and my doctor who followed me for the other pregnancies, I discovered she was against abortion. I didn't know, so she just dumped me. She said, "No, I don't know what you can do. Go out." So first she tried to talk me out of it, and then when she said that I wanted to terminate, she disappeared. So the process was quite long because I had to find another doctor, and it was August in Rome. It's like the desert; everybody's on holiday. So I started knock to hospitals, and a very big hospital in Rome. They told me everybody was against abortion. So I mean, it was quite long. At the end, I could do it, but it took like 10 days or so. And in that moment, it's a very long time. And I remember that I was feeling like a piece of meat. That's really what I was feeling. So it was all physical. It wasn't. I couldn't like process it from a intellectual point of view. So that's why I chose to write it from the body perspective. And I think this should be the approach we should have about these kind of topics, because if we talk about abortion, many times we approach it from like an ethical point of view. And I think that nobody can agree on this. If we ask 100 people, I don't know, is the embryo alive? Is it a person? Everybody will have their own opinion, and science is not like a one straight answer to it. It doesn't matter. What matters is that there's like a physical problem. Okay, so it's like how women experience it, and it's really, really painful from a physical point of view. And it's also very hard because there's like I don't want to be like to shock anybody, but it's like a physical process. There's blood, there's like exam, there's pain, and we don't talk about it when we talk about abortion. No, it's not about is the baby alive, is it fair or not. It's what is this flesh experiencing too. And that's surely something I was thinking about. I was thinking about that baby that I wanted. I was like visualizing it. Okay, so it was really, really physical. And after my experience, I read like Annie Arnaud's book, The Event, when she talks about her abortion. It was like in a legal one in France in the 60s, and it was also very, very like visual. And I really recognize myself in that. I think it's a very good approach, not only for what I said before, but I think that many people that didn't have this experience, they don't know what it is about. They don't know what is an abortion.
You're absolutely right. We definitely need authentic portrayals of reproductive experiences. Absolutely. So, Andrea, also, in your writings about matricentric feminism and more broadly about motherhood, the concept of embodiment is a key theme. So, my question for you is how, again, the body and embodiment relates to a matricentric approach and to reproductive justice.
Thank you for the question, but I would like to say first, thank you to both of you for your narratives, so poignant, powerful, and I think in many ways answers the first question, how essential stories are to get to truth, to resist, to make change. So thank you. And again, working more as a theorist than a writer, but for me, why I think a matricentric perspective is so important, and I think both of you have illustrated better than I could in your stories. We need to know what this means for the mother, right, or the woman if she chooses not to be a mother. And I was once asked, what is matricentric feminism? And of course I've written a book on it, and I have all these theories and sub-theories. But for me, it's you begin with the mother and you stay with her and you ask, what does this mean for you? Right. And I think if we actually ask those questions, there is an interface with reproductive justice. Right. I think, unfortunately, and I see some people in the room that I've had this conversation with, that in many ways there has been a bit of disconnect between reproductive justice theorists and theories and scholarship. And then there's this other field of, motherhood studies or matricentric feminism. And of course, there's been some overlap and interface. We wouldn't be in the space together if that had not been so. But I do think we need to speak more to each other. I think there needs to be more dialogue between these two fields, and they be less siloed. And I say that because I think it's so self-evident for us in the room. But what does this mean for a mother? That is what reproductive justice is, the right to have a child, the right not to have a child, and the right to raise a child as you wish. And the only person that can answer that question is not the politicians, it's not the doctors, it's not presidents of the United States, it is the woman, right? And that's for me what matricentric feminism is to see the world, to see how we live in the world, how we need to change the world through the eyes of the mother. What does this mean for you? And I know that's somewhat simplistic and naive, but we need to just keep saying that and demanding that. Lorinda's, such poignant. I mean, I know the story, Lorinda, I've read it, but to see that visually there, why didn't anybody ever ask that mother, what can I do for you? What does this mean for you? How can I help you? And similar to yours, Orsola, what does this mean as a mother or a pregnant woman or pregnant person? So I think that I think there's such possibilities if we keep foregrounding matricentric perspectives in reproductive justice and have more dialogue across those two disciplines. But thank you to both the earlier speakers for your poignant stories that show what we need to know if we actually took a moment and actually read and listened to mother's stories.
Absolutely. And in your answer, Andrea, you also introduced me to the next point, which was about conversations. And my question for you was precisely about how do you see a dialogue between reproductive justice and matricentric feminism? But I think you have clearly made your point about the necessity, to establish a dialogue, because we're basically fighting the same struggles here. So we have to see each other as allies and not as enemies. So thank you for that. So, I mean, looking at conversation, so how your narratives for you, Lorinda and Orsola, dialogues and interacts with existing narratives. So my question specifically for you, Lorinda, was about how queer narratives and queer practices have reshaped the framework of reproductive justice. So what can we learn, for example, from adopting a queer perspective within reproductive justice?
Hey, it's interesting because I don't, even though I am queer and I am a mother and have been for a long time, I don't deal with it a lot in my own work. I do have experience, but what I can say, I see it as kind of a double-edged sword. For one thing, I think that queer individuals have more opportunities in the sense to choose to mother or not mother without dealing with a degree of blame by society or whoever, family maybe, because they say, oh well, she can't because she's a lesbian or whatever. So I think there is that. But I also think that for especially lesbian mothers or lesbian women who choose to mother, whether they're in a relationship or not, the institutions are somewhat against them if they are going to rely on donated sperm, because it's very policed, difficult to get. And if a potential mother has past life experiences that the people in power decide are not good for mothers, then that person won't get sperm. And so their decision for that route is not going to work as far as trying to get pregnant. So they can, decide to find a willing male sperm donor that they know, or through some other experience, and try to conceive that way. So I think that is a disadvantage. Some of the advantages, I think, for now, when I'm going to include gay men in this, because the discourse on gay men and parenting is rather limited, same as for trans folks. And I think that would be, is something that needs a lot of work as well. So there's two things. For gay men, like they do mother care, they raise their children. So, in the big perspective, matricentrically, they're mothers, maybe they're fathers, but they're doing that mother care. And they have the opportunity of surrogacy to produce children the same as heterosexual people do, which is an advantage. But that depends on, we talk about privilege and we talk about all kinds of other influences, past experiences of individuals on their desires to become mothers and or parents in that sense. So I see it as kind of a double-edged sword where there's some opportunities out there, but there's definitely oppressions to whether or not they will be successful in conceiving a child. But the decisions for queer people become more necessary. I think that's the big thing. It's you need to choose to be a mother or not to be a mother, because for bisexual folks, maybe there could be loops or something, but generally speaking, you have to make that choice. I'm a lesbian, I want to be a mother, and these are the steps I have to take to get there. So it's kind of onerous, but it does demand those choices. And I think, from my experience, that's about all I have to say on that.
But I must admit that from my Italian context, my Italian perspective, your words are revolutionary, if not utopian here, because I'm thinking of the fact that last October, the Italian Senate approved a law which makes surrogacy a universal crime for Italian citizens. And this is like a sort of final step, a climax in a series of laws which have been implemented in the past few years against queer families. So having the desire of being a queer mother in Italy is something which is not very much a choice right now. So
Right.
I really see the difference between the North American context and the Italian context, which is so behind on these reproductive issues. And so shifting to the Italian context with you, Orsola, we have had, especially in the first seminar, contributors talking about abortion and motherhood in relation to Italian text, Italian cultural narratives. And what I found particularly interesting in your text is how you try to reach a balance, to reconcile the right to abortion on the one hand, but also the right and the claim to have a child as equally feminist act. And so my question for you is, how does your text, your writing, your experience situate itself within the current feminist discourses on motherhood in Italy?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I don't know, because in Italy, as you said, we are like in the Middle Ages. I was thinking that Lorinda, if you're from the future, I had the same reaction as Veronica. And it's not that we don't have like kids that have same-sex parents, because in the school of my daughter, there's a little girl with two dads, but they are illegal. I don't know what will happen with those kids because they exist. So it's not like you make a law and these people cease to exist. And those kids, they should have rights too, right? Anyway, I feel like that the Italian feminist debate, it's more nowadays centered on the right not to have kids. I think that's the main issue for especially younger women to claim. And that's understandable, because it's very hard to have kids in Italy and to work, like simple as that. We have, especially in the south of the country, 50% women who have children, they just they quit working because our social system is not like built for that. So it's like the main claim now. And the same word, the word family, familia, I feel that in Italy it became like a far right concept, and this is very sad because it shouldn't be like that. But when we say, I mean, the Lega, the far right party Lega, they make the Family Day, and it's basically like a big demonstration just in order to defend what they call the traditional family, which is a very excluding concept. So I really believe that you could be a feminist, you can be a mother. I'm a mother, but I love my kids, but I also do not regret having an abortion. And it's very difficult for me to say that here. And it was very difficult to promote the book, not from the below, because I get messages on social media every day from women who had the same experiences as I did. And I'm happy because it means that my book helped, but it's also very sad because, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm just a person that had that experience and told everybody. So I don't know. It's I think we really have work to do on that matter here.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your comment and how the very concept of family is being appropriated right now by right-wing rhetorics. And I had a conversation with Andrea because I'm translating a book into Italian, which will be released next spring. It's a series of writings by Andrea. And we had this conversation, and I don't know if you remember, one of my questions was precisely about how can we publish a book which somehow encourages feminist mothering without running the risk of being patronized by conservative and right-wing rhetoric. So this is another very crucial point, for example, here. But unfortunately, I don't think this is just an Italian concern right now. So my next point was picking up some of other keywords that we had from the series. So I'll just summarize the question I shared with you, and then of course you can answer on the aspect that you are more willing to. So some of the keywords that came out was about, again, vulnerability, privilege, of course, intersectionality. Another element was that of rage, which is a powerful yet contested emotion in feminist and reproductive justice movements. So I had a curiosity, a question about how does rage feature in your narratives and theories, and what possibility does it open up for storytelling and advocacy. And my third point was about how do you negotiate between individual empowerment and solidarity, so between a personal and a collective dimension in your narratives, but also, of course, in your theory.
I'll go first. For the open question. Thank you for that question. There's three. I will not dare try to answer all three because we need to leave time for our question and answers. But thank you for the question on rage. I think we also talked about that when we did our conversation a couple weeks back. What has, I guess, surprised me, as you mentioned in my bio, for the last 4 years, I've been just reading memoirs and novels written by women, published since 2010. And I've probably read close to 50. A lot of them were read during the pandemic. And as you mentioned, I've published now 15 chapters and I think on 32 novels. And if I could name one theme that runs through all of them, and they're very diverse. I've got a Basque writer, I've got a South African writer, I've got a Mexican writer, Canadian, Irish, US, New Zealand. So it's pretty diverse. Could be more, and I'm working on that. And a lot of African American as well. I've got South Asian, queer, rage with all caps. In all the memoirs and novels I've read, rage is just so pronounced and prominent in all the narratives. Mothers are fucking mad and they are demanding change. They are done They are undone. They are, and I think, so what do we do with that rage? So of course, when you talk about rage, who do you go to? You go back to Adrienne Rich and you go back to Audre Lorde. And I remember, so I was looking again, of course, at Adrienne Rich. Her 50th anniversary of A Woman Born will be happening next year. And of course, Audre Lorde. And I just, in the preface to this third edition of her work, the writer says that Rich's embrace of rage, like Lorde's, is liberating. She writes openly about the violence women are capable of doing. But how do we then harness and use this rage for our own well-being and for social change? So the minute we talk about rage, I'll end with this, but we go back, of course, to the ultimate enraged, pissed off mother. And that is, of course, is Demeter. And of course, I've named the press in honor of Demeter, who, as we all know the story, who withhold the coming of spring when her daughter was abducted to the underworld, Persephone. And she went to the head god, Zeus, and said, no, I'm not going to have the spring come. All you mortals are going to starve to death unless you return my daughter. Of course he does. I know it's more complex than that, but I think Rich is one of the first to recognize the power of rage when it's harnessed, when a woman has resources. So rage is rage, but to make rage manifest, to make it liberating, to make it life-changing, to make it society-changing, that has to be harnessed, and it needs to be done from a place of empowerment and a place of collectivity and solidarity with other women. So I really think this is the new space we are in. And women are really angry about they're being forced to have children. They are being told they cannot have children, and they're being told how they can raise those children. So this is where I really think motherhood studies and reproductive justice studies converge in the harnessing of rage as a place for change, empowerment, and hopefully, ideally, revolution.
Excellent.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah. Lorinda?
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen again. Let's see how we do. Oops, no. Oh. Okay, sorry. I am Zoom.
I am the worst at technology, so that's no problem at all.
Okay, we're here. So share now, right?
Yes.
So, sorry, I just have to put this in show mode.
Okay.
There we go.
Perfect.
Share. Can you see it?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Okay, I actually want to go back when. Oops, I want to. Oh, come on. Okay, so this is another 2 pages from my memoir, and they're reversed, unfortunately. I don't know why, but this is my mother over here throwing a baby bottle at the wall and smashing it into a million pieces. She's enraged. She's angry. She's pissed off. She's all of that because my father was not, trustworthy, and he fathered another child outside the relationship at the same time as my mother was pregnant for my younger sister. So my mother has every right to be enraged. Of course, socially, that was not the way it was seen. My mother was seen as being, extreme and crazy and everything that goes with it. But the other side of this is that there was another woman at question, another mother, that was totally ignored in any consideration of the story as it was told. And so neither mother had choices. My mother really couldn't leave my father back then because that would have been the third child and no work and no money. The other mother had no access to my father for support or to build a family. So this was kind of a double-edged, and I don't know, I can't speak to her rage or her story, but that's where rage to me is centered, and there's total unfairness in the whole maternal system. However, as we see here, not the one I want, this one. So in this one, shoot, sorry. Where are you? In this one. Okay, so this is, and again, 2 pages from a different book. It's not the novel, but I call it Life Cycle 1 and Life Cycle 2. And what we see here is mothers working together to create enough power to birth children and have them traverse whatever this fucking patriarchal system of something is to get past the polluted world that they're born into. And the image raises the question, do the mothers, can they generate enough power? Can they work hard enough to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish? Because I think that is where, if there is any solution, as Andrea said, that's exactly where it lay. Mothers working together, understanding their positions, understanding the world around them, and then working together to try to raise children, if they choose to raise children, in ways that move the children beyond to some kind of different position and perspective. So I think that's, for me, my answer to both those questions.
Thank you, Lorinda. Thank you for sharing your beautiful visual stories. They're amazing.
Try to get it out of here again. Can somebody tell me, do I just shrink do I just do this? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm going to stop the sharing of your screen if that's right.
Stop the sharing of my screen.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Orsola?
Yes, I just wanted to add something about privilege. I think it's a very important notion because, of course, I was in a position of privilege. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to write my story. And I was privileged because I lived in a big city, in the capital. I had some intellectual preparation that helped me, elaborate it, and not everybody has that. So if for me it was so difficult and so traumatic, I cannot imagine maybe a young girl living in the south of Italy with their family against us, because there's also, social pressure. So the question is what we do with this privilege, if we're able to share it and make a network with other women that are less privileged than us. That's what I tried to do. I don't know if it worked, but I really hope that privilege can be a good thing, in the sense that people who own that privilege can maybe be a voice for women that don't have that privilege in that moment.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And I really like the fact that, for example, again, in your text, you make reference to the fact that you are in the capital. So it is more accessible for you, abortion also from a geographical point of view. Whereas we know that in Italy, we have several places where that is no longer possible, where the only doctor, it was not an objector, retired. So now women have to travel thousands of kilometers to get abortion. So I think privilege, vulnerability, and an intersectional lens are crucial in narrating about motherhood, non-motherhood, and reproductive justice. So I'm moving to my final point here, which was about echoes from a geographical and transcultural point of view, but I think we have already covered it. So I'll end with the $1 million question, which is echoes as a temporal dynamic. So about the potential to shape the future. So the question I shared with you was, in what unexpected ways do you see women's writing influencing the trajectory of reproductive justice? So how might storytelling, but also, of course, theory and criticism challenge or expand current understandings and opening pathways to future we have yet to imagine? And this question actually came to me because our last seminar was very much focused on reproductive justice and climate change, for example. So we really talk about mothering at the end of the word in a way. So how do you see, which direction do you think women's writing could take to open up something new, maybe something empowering with reference to reproductive justice? Lorinda, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll try to share the screen again.
Okay, good.
Okay. Getting better at it. Whoops, wrong one. There it is. Okay, I'm gonna get this out of the way. That's not the one I want to share, though. So I wanted to share this one, which is, you've seen the first two images. It's my grandmother's story, it's my mother's story, and that's my story. So I want to tie it. I thought I would kind of tie this into time because my story is intergenerational. Okay, I'm looking at reproductive justice and reproductive rights and understanding and mother's perspectives across time, across generations. In my case, what we probably can't read here in the text is that I was 17 in this picture. I got married to a 17-year-old boy. And I was having this baby clinically with forceps pulling her head out of my vagina. And I was like enraged for sure. But the real thing is that when I went to the doctor, he asked me if I wanted an abortion. Now, to me, when I look across time, and I know he was saying that he knew me, he was my family doctor, so he knew my family, right? And I know he was saying, you're never going to raise this kid. You're 17, you're this, that, and the other thing. But the fact is, my grandmother would never have been asked that question, nor my mother. Abortion was still illegal when she had most of her children. I think, as she says, I think here somewhere, or the other frame, if abortion had been legal, some of us might not be here. Okay, became legal 3 years after my mother gave birth to my youngest sibling. So so there's that. So I was offered an abortion. So to me, there's a time thing there, and I just want to share, if I might, and then I will. Whoops, maybe I won't. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, we'll get the thing back here. I want to share a quick poem because a lot of my work comes out in poetry. Where are you? Too much stuff at the bottom of the screen. Okay. Sorry. Can I get that out of there? Okay. Okay, I'm just going to read it. Sorry if you can't see it. It's called Erosion. And it ties into climate change, loosely, metaphorically, which is why I wanted to share it. These words are what sustains me, repeated over and over in different constructions. The same words attached to another memory until all the memories lodge in my body, slowly eroding the surface, the way a mountain erodes over time, releasing a grain, a pebble, a landslide, all the forces acting on it denied. Climate change is more culpable as acts of God. Science rejected. Violence is more destructive in the context of love. The hands that lure me to orgasm clamping around my throat. Winds, words, rains, tears, ice, fingers, rocks, fists, mountains of poetry. Systemic. The mountain ceases to matter, merges with the body, strong in the face of diversity, unaware of its slow demise. So basically, it's looking at moving towards climate change from a powerless position, as mothers, and really encouraging a more empowered position to try to stop the forces that are acting on not only motherhood, not only on reproductive justice, but on the environment. Because in the end, yes, the body will be demised just like the world will if we don't do our part to help stop the destruction. So we're complicit in some ways if we don't do that. So I don't know if that ties in exactly, but loosely that's where my thinking was on that. So we need to come together in solidarity, and we need to move the discourse forward towards dealing not only with motherhood and maternal issues, but also with how we are impacted by the outside world and how we impact it and how we could impact it.
I think this perfectly ties all the main points of my question. And thank you also for sharing your poetry alongside your visual narrative.
Thank you.
So who wants to go next?
Okay, I will. I will be brief. Thank you again, Lorinda. I was going to answer this question differently when I was preparing for last week, but I'm going to answer it after something I've read over the weekend. We keep going back to the importance of stories, and I guess I have a bias. I have a PhD in English, but I believe stories we only have stories to live by, and they give us places to imagine, to create, to envision, to critique, and then I think about Audre Lorde's comment about her, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. But I think we have the tools. And the article I read on the weekend was quite revealing. It was in the New Yorker, I believe, and it was about who was reading and who was writing books. And 80% of readers now are women. Shocking, right? And in creative writing classes, 60% of people now in creative writing classes are women. So much so that publishers are now wary to publish books by white men because they won't sell. I just said that out loud, right? I taught, through all my PhD, I taught Introduction to American Literature, Introduction to Drama, Introduction to this and that. We fought hard and to get one woman on a syllabus of 26 weeks. We are in a different universe right now. Women are, most books are published now by women. They're saying, Booker Prizes, majority now are women who are reading the books. They're women. We have our moment now, right? I'm not saying they're all about mothers, but a large number are. So I'm not saying, literature is going to save us and change the world, but I do think we have this tool available to us. We have stories. We have women finally writing in numbers never seen before, and many of them are mothers. And there's great diversity for the first time as well. So I think we have to really seize this moment. We need to write those stories, but we need to read those stories, and we need to see literature as not apolitical. We need to see literature as a place where we can make change, do the criticism. Going back to Lorinda's point, I just finished a chapter on climate change fiction and written by mothers. Everybody needs to read those novels, right? I think it's in stories that we're critiquing and in stories where we're imagining. Not saying that's the only place. We have to, feet on the ground. We have to keep doing our activism in the streets. But I think we have a moment here in history and her story where we can really see possibilities for critique and change. And they're in the stories we're writing, and more of us need to be writing and reading them.
Thank you, Andrea. I think, again, here, unfortunately, at least in Italy, we are still living in another universe, because I'm thinking of schools, high schools, but also universities. And I don't know how many women authors are currently taught in introductory courses to Italian literature. So we're still struggling. But definitely we have some major female authors who are taking the scene, thankfully. Orsola.
Yes, I agree with Andrea. It's true that we have a voice that maybe we never had. And we also have technology to share that voice that we didn't have before. I'm here with you. For me, it's amazing, right? To present my little Italian book here. It wouldn't have been possible a few years ago. But I'm also pessimistic because I really feel that we are like in a cultural war, not only in Italy, but all around the world. Like there are two sides, the progressive sides. And it's true that we shouldn't only care about our, me, abortion, because I experienced it, but all social rights about women who live in the war, which is like another patriarchal, I cannot say it, but you understand, like a massive problem. But we see that politics all around the world, it's not the side that's winning. It's not our side, let's say, and not all women are feminists. That's another problem. Like our prime minister, she's a woman. And it's like a paradox because she couldn't be there if it wasn't for all the feminists that fought for her to be. But she said, "I don't want to be called Madam President. I want to be called Mr. President." So I don't know. It's really a very difficult battle, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for this linguistic reference, which I think it's not something we explore too much deeply in this series, but I think also in terms of language, that's another huge field for struggle.
Yes.
Of course, Italian is a gender language, so
Yes.
for us,
Sure.
it's even more complicated. But it's something definitely we have to look at. So I really want to thank the first speakers for being, so for how you accepted and answer to my question. I found some of your answers encouraging, some provoking. I was deeply touched by some of your answers. So really, thank you.